Welcome to the Explore Digital podcast. I'm super excited to welcome Barbie. I'm Darci. I am the owner of Explore Digital, and we're excited to be working on a podcast. So this is the official flannel episode from Barbie and I.
Here we go.
Barbie and I have been working together since about 2017. So her and I go way back when it comes to SEO, and we've kind of seen it all in some cases. We had a couple cool things to talk about for today and just kind of exploring the world of SEO. It's changing. It's always changing. We have a couple topics. One is about SEO horror stories. And so we wanted to pick out a couple of horror stories that we saw on Reddit specifically.
Super fun to read.
Yeah. So Barbie, what are people saying on Reddit? What's going on Reddit?
One thing I just looked up because you said you wanted to talk about SEO's horror stories. And I was like looking at some of our own clients. We've seen even recently some SEO fundamentals that haven't been planned by maybe an outside developer coming in and redoing a site and then not planning for what is the fundamental of 301 redirects, right? And so we've seen that still, and just always so shocked that someone would launch a website, without those type of plans in place.
I know who you're talking about, actually. So essentially, client, they asked to put together a website from an outside development firm to cut costs. And one of the things that I needed to talk to the client about was essentially, hey, don't just launch this because you have a very lucrative website. We need to do an SEO review to make sure that this goes off without a hitch. Ultimately, what we found is URLs have changed. So we've had to have discussions about URLs because when you change it from a previous path and it's not communicated to Google or other search engines, it can lead to traffic drop-offs immediately. So making sure that when you're doing a new website, going from a phase 1 website to a phase 2 website, ultimately, making sure that you have a migration plan. A lot of folks don't plan for that. And as far as horror stories go, I remember I was at a lunch and somebody said, hey, our really big website, we launched and all of a sudden there's no traffic. There's absolutely no traffic. And I had to look at the robot files real quick. And luckily that's just, a quick little look. They had shut their website off to Google and search engines being able to come to it. So, just even fixing that and saying, hey, Google, we just redid our website. And you submit it to Google and say, hey, come back to our website, take a look at it. That can fix it immediately. So you need to have a migration strategy in place right away so that when you do launch a new website, nothing falls off. There's definitely going to be a little bit of movement, but ultimately that's the biggest gap that people have in their process is they don't know that they need to ensure that URLs are the same or redirected to make sure that they're showing up in the search results or that they have, it's called a no index or robot files are disallowing.
Yeah, and I had even one client recently say, hey, when I submitted my XML sitemap, they were enough SEO savvy that they did that.
Yeah.
But they're like, but I'm still not seeing any movement on these new pages that I launched. And I said, well, have you physically gone in and said, hey, Google, index these pages? And he said, no. And so even submitting an XML sitemap doesn't necessarily guarantee that your site will be indexed. And so once I did that, all of a sudden, they appeared. I wonder sometimes too, why Google, I think on this website, there was actually a lot of duplication in the content, which could have been well, Google's hey, I've seen these pages already. This kind of looks similar. So I just don't feel the need to index it. And then I physically said, well, actually, this is different. Mm-hmm. And so I needed to submit it. So maybe that's the reason. I don't know why. Yeah, it was interesting.
One of the first steps with SEO essentially is making sure that Google can visit your website and they call it crawl, but meaning they read the information that's on the page to understand, hey, does this belong? If somebody's typing in plumber near me, is this a query that's relevant to that? The first step is making sure that the connection between your website and Google is actually there. So that's step number 1. I call it technical SEO. That's one of the major pillars. And that's definitely an SEO horror story to not have that traffic come into the site. I think that's a good walkthrough for sure. And let us know if you've ever had, that happen to you. We're even happy to look at it for you if you should need it because it's very stressful when that happens.
Yeah, it's like, why? I just launched this great page, and why is it not appearing in the Google search when I search on, especially if it's a, long tail and would get some visibility. Yeah, there could possibly be stuck. And that would, they say, like, discovered but not indexed. Yeah. Google has that. A lot of times it's really important for you to go and make sure that your site is in Google Search Console and look on page indexing. And actually Google will say, hey, we discovered this page, but we didn't index it. And you're like, well, there could be issues, a robot, no index on it, or it could be just they discovered it and felt like they didn't need to crawl it. So then you have to say, hey, no, I really want this crawled. I know. So
no, that's super, super helpful to know. So those are some of the like really quick things that you can do to help diagnose what might be happening. There's a term that you just used that I don't think most audience will be familiar with. I'm wondering about Longtail. What does that mean to a user?
I don't think people type in shoes anymore into, the search engine.
Shoes near me.
Or shoes near me. Oh, I mean, they might type that. That's actually almost considered, maybe they would type in, either they're typing in maybe a question into Google, which would be like obviously automatically a long-term query, or they would just be typing in something so specific, which would make it a long tail keyword. So that's what I feel like, it is. No one's just typing in shoes.
So like as an example, in terms of contrast, I used to work for a firm that just specialized in chiropractic. So as an example, Chiropractor San Diego is a trophy term, right? And that's not necessarily long tail, but chiropractor specializing in car accident injury or specializing in sciatica, San Diego, that's more of a long tail term. So that's more of a specific term. And those actually, I believe, typically convert at much higher rates too, because that's somebody who's done their research and they know that they need a sciatica expert. Longtail is actually a way to get better quality users, but the problem with Longtail is that it doesn't have necessarily a lot more traffic than like Chiropractor San Diego. Chiropractor San Diego's got more traffic, but it's not as quality traffic potentially.
Yeah. And then you got to ask yourself, well, then what would you have to do to come up for an actual specific long term, keyword search like that? And obviously there's a few things, Google business profile. You'd have to make sure that that's a service that's actually in your Google business profile so that Google profile shows up. And then you'd actually have to make sure that either there's mention on your homepage for the car accident, or specializing in sciatica, nerve issues, that would have to be on the homepage, or that it would have to at least have some location long-term page mention. So that was a great strategy. And I think that's truly what is luckily AI is really looking for, when it goes. It's looking for that specific information as beginning to really show that in the search results. For sure.
Yeah, we're seeing that on Gemini. We're seeing that with ChatGPT and whatnot. Like they're summarizing more top of funnel research related queries, but not necessarily local queries. So for instance, let's bring it back to chiropractor. So if I'm looking at Chiropractor San Diego, I'm not necessarily going to see a Gemini result. I'm going to see the Google business results with 3 options of chiropractors nearby plus the organic results. But if I was to look at how to deal with sciatica or sciatica treatment or sciatica cure, that's going to bring up Gemini necessarily. So we're starting to get into specifics of where Gemini comes in and where AI comes in, and then where local results are. And it seems like local's almost untouched in this, but top of funnel informational and research queries are more impacted with Gemini specifically.
Yeah, like I think I saw a query that I saw where it's like best pergola builder in San Diego actually would bring up some of the
brought up Gemini results.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was because it's still kind of an informational query, but it's a local information. So I brought all the sites that were San Diego based on that.
And it brought up company results. Okay. All right. So local is getting shaken up too. Okay. So that's a recent. Okay. All right.
Oh, I was, yeah.
It's changing. It's
It is
changing every day.
every single day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, it was different though, because I saw it just Pergola San Diego, then it would trigger a Google business profile. But when you're asking what is the best, or if it's like kind of almost an article.
Yeah. Like a listicle, maybe?
Listicle.
Yeah. Okay.
But it did bring up companies, which I was, on this particular, because I think it was such a specific query.
Yeah.
I don't know. So AI is kind of like, well, I don't know. I see San Diego. I see Pergola. Let's go through the websites and see what gives the most,
I love this. That example, because we kind of just talked about pillar number 2 of SEO, which is making sure that the keywords that you want to go after are actually on the website, in the content. We're telling our users and our search engines, this is why we're relevant. We handle this. Just like you said, how sciatica needs to be on the website, car accident would need to be on that chiropractor example. So that's step 2, is making sure that the content's on the site. But then to take your example further, when it comes to those Gemini results, how is Gemini essentially getting that list, and how is Gemini trusting that list? I think that brings us to pillar number 3 of SEO, 3 out of 3 of SEO, which is we need a little bit of clout, and we actually need other websites mentioning that we do that pergola. For that example, that pergola, how does Google know to endorse those companies? And that comes down to some link building. Yep. Link building and PR. It's a little bit of both, where, maybe a news outlet or a local blogger or even a local publishing website talking about local news and whatnot, or local happenings, them actually saying these are the best, essentially, and providing what's called a link that takes you to the Pergola Builder's website that says we endorse this website. So you have to build up that third party credibility. That's one of the hardest pieces of SEO, actually, which we support, though. We do that.
Yeah. And I think I always feel like that's the lowest priority, because that's the hardest for a client to, as far as like in opening their wallet to. So I feel like, we always kind of start with the content and making sure the structure of the content really makes sense, the heading and the subheadings and the content is on page that's, it's a pergola builder in San Diego, that's mentioned on the page. And so that's always number 1 as well. And then, the link building and internal linking too within the content is really important, because then Google can just kind of see that and go off. But it's that one is hard. How do you get clients to understand and see the value of link building and say, hey, it is someone linking to your site, giving your site credibility.
It doesn't happen right away. I mean, at the end of the day, Google wants to show the most popular, most credible and trustworthy businesses to their users, to make sure that the search results deliver on what the user's asking for. That's why people keep turning to Google. So those 3 pieces are what, an SEO agency's job are, to make sure we've got a good connection with Google. Google knows what we're doing. We've got the right content to communicate to both our users and Google what we do. And then step 3 is we got to make sure that people know about this and they trust us and like us. And that kind of comes back in the form of what, you're building up your domain authority and your trust. So that's kind of how I simplify SEO. Those are the 3 main pillars to get to the end, to get to the goal of ranking for relevant queries. And I always thought it was really interesting that, 70 to 90% of users are clicking on those first 3 listings, those unpaid listings, whereas about 10 to 30% of users are clicking on those paid links up at the top. So if anybody ever says, hey, SEO is not as effective, no, 70 to 90% of users are clicking on those top 3 listings. Well, that's all I have today. Thank you so much for watching our podcast and going through SEO and kind of demystifying what it is, how to handle it, things you should consider. And I'm super excited that we were able to have Barbie on today.
feel free to reach out and ask me questions, and don't forget to subscribe.